Pay close attention to these images. What is about to happen now is impressive. That bright spot moving in the sky may seem harmless, but it was an attack. Iran has just attacked a country it should never have attacked, and this attack is the biggest mistake Iran could have made in this war. No, it wasn't a targeting error, it wasn't an accident, it was a decision.
Is the HMS Duncan and the HMS
A decision that brought serious consequences, which are unfolding right now while you watch this video. In the next few minutes, you will understand exactly what this mistake was and why it can completely change the course of this war. To understand the magnitude of this mistake, you need to understand what was happening before. When this war started, Iran had a strategy that on paper made sense. The idea was simple: to put pressure on the Gulf countries, countries like Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, and Kuwait, to pressure these countries with attacks and threats until they forced the United States to accept a ceasefire. And do you want to know why this strategy could work? Well, because at the beginning of the war, all these countries were outside the conflict. They didn't want to get involved. Saudi Arabia had denied the United States the use of its military bases, had closed its airspace to American planes, and had made public statements against the attacks on Iran. The other Gulf countries did the same. This represented enormous political power in the hands of Iran. After all, if the Gulf countries, which have a very close relationship with the United States, asked the Trump administration to stop the war, that would carry real weight. It could change something. So Iran started attacking, but this is where the mistake begins. A mistake that gets bigger with every passing hour. Because Iran didn't stop at the Gulf countries, it went further, much further. In the first 24 hours of war, Iran attacked 9 different countries. 2 days later, that number had risen to 15. 15 countries, including Oman, Cyprus, France, the United Kingdom, and Italy, in addition to all the Gulf neighbors who were already being attacked. And this is where Iran's strategy starts to completely fall apart. Because there's a huge difference between attacking your declared enemies and attacking countries that were trying in every way to stay out of this war. Countries that had made it clear they didn't want to get involved, that had even helped block the Americans in the name of a neutrality that Iran did not respect. Let's start with the most impactful case in the Gulf, Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia had made it clear from the beginning that it was not going to get involved in this war. They denied the use of their bases to the United States, closed Saudi airspace to any operation against Iran, and publicly promised that they would not give any kind of military support to attacks against Tehran. They did everything possible to remain neutral, but Iran attacked Saudi Arabia anyway without stopping. Missiles and drones began to fall on Saudi territory, near the capital, close to a military base in the north of the country, in regions near the Persian Gulf, even closer to the Iranian border. All the attacks were intercepted. But the message had been delivered, and the response from Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman was immediate. He called the Iranian attacks cowardly and explained exactly why, saying, Iran knew with absolute certainty that Saudi airspace was not being used to attack Iran. Saudi Arabia had upheld its part of neutrality, and Iran attacked anyway. Because of this, the prince declared that he was putting the security of Saudi Arabia above all else, the security of the territory, the security of the citizens. And he authorized the Saudi military forces to respond if Iran attacked again. But it didn't stop there. The prince called President Trump and, in that conversation, according to what the Saudi government itself reported publicly, Trump gave full support to the way Saudi Arabia planned to respond. Saudi Arabia, which was the biggest symbol of neutrality in this war, was now preparing to strike back against Iran. Iran had just turned its main potential regional ally into an armed enemy with American support. And if you think the Saudi Arabia case was already absurd, wait until you see what Iran did with the United Arab Emirates. The numbers I'm about to show you are hard to believe. The United Arab Emirates was being attacked in a way that can only be described as absurd. The Ministry of Defense of the Emirates confirmed the official numbers. Out of the 541 drones launched against the country, the Emirates shot down 506. And out of the 165 missiles fired, they managed to destroy 152. 152 missiles intercepted by a single country that was not at war. And do you know why the Emirates were receiving that many attacks? The answer is simple: because they are considered allies of the United States. Not because they were attacking Iran, not because they had given any military support against Tehran, but simply because they have a close relationship with the Americans. Little is said about this in the news, but this level of bombing has real consequences for real people, civilians who are working. Tourists who travel to the region without imagining they would become targets of a war that wasn't theirs. Workers who couldn't even properly explain what was happening in the sky above their heads. Dozens of victims scattered across the Gulf countries, ordinary people who paid the price for a decision made hundreds of kilometers away. The Gulf countries then held an emergency meeting with the United States and issued a joint statement condemning all actions of the Iranian regime. Iran's strategy of pressuring the Gulf to force a ceasefire had produced exactly the opposite effect. Instead of allies pressuring the Americans to stop, Iran created a united bloc of Gulf countries alongside the United States. But what happened after that was even more impressive. Because Iran decided to attack a country that has nothing to do with the Middle East, a European country with a base on NATO soil. And this is exactly where the drone you saw at the beginning of this video truly comes into the story. In the early hours of a Monday, around midnight, a Shahed-type drone hit the British airbase of Akrotiri in Cyprus. Picture the scene: a British military base on European soil. In the middle of the night, sirens blaring, soldiers running, and the villages around the British airbase being evacuated in a hurry. And there's a detail in this attack that can't go unnoticed. Russian components were found in the wreckage of this drone. This information was reported by United 24. And it matters because this means that the attack on a NATO base on European soil was carried out with an Iranian-made drone, possibly launched by Hezbollah from Lebanon. Two countries behind a weapon, a British target. To understand the significance of this, you need to know where the United Kingdom stood in this war up until that point. The United Kingdom had publicly refused to participate in the conflict. The British government had forbidden the United States from using joint bases for attacks against Iran.
Yesterday, I talked to you about the situation in the Gulf and explained that the United Kingdom was not involved in the attacks against Iran,
including the Diego Garcia base, which would be strategically essential for long-range operations. A decision that created significant tension between London and Washington. The United Kingdom had closed all doors, and Iran attacked anyway. The response was immediate. A Typhoon fighter jet from the British Royal Air Force operating out of Qatar shot down an Iranian drone heading toward Qatari territory with an air-to-air missile. This was the first time a British fighter jet shot down a drone since the conflict began. And it didn't stop there. Prime Minister Keir Starmer announced the deployment of HMS Dragon to the Mediterranean. HMS Dragon is a Type 45 destroyer of the British Royal Navy.
There are 2 Type 45 destroyers.
One of the warships with the greatest anti-air capability in operation in the world. Along with it, helicopters with drone combat capability were sent to Cyprus. Starmer himself called the Cypriot president to personally confirm the deployment, but that was just the beginning. The British Prime Minister went public and made an announcement that changed the scale of this war. He said that partner countries in the Gulf had asked the United Kingdom to do more to defend the region, that it was their duty to protect British lives. That British fighter jets were already in the air, successfully intercepting Iranian attacks. And then came the part that no one expected, he said.
The way to stop the threat is to destroy the missiles.
That the only way to really stop the threat is to destroy the missiles at the source, in the depots where they are stored, in the launchers used to fire them. The United States had made a formal request to the British government to use UK bases to attack Iran, and the British government had made the decision to accept. The United Kingdom, which just days before didn't even want to hear about the conflict, was now opening its bases for American operations against Iran and sending its own fighter jets to defend allies in the region. With a single attack in Cyprus, Iran pushed the United Kingdom into this war, but everything indicates that Iran learned nothing from what happened with the United Kingdom. And this next mistake was filmed. And when you see the video, you'll understand why France made the decision it did. Right after attacking the British base in Cyprus, Iran attacked the French naval base in Abu Dhabi. A kamikaze drone dove straight into the French facility. The explosion was caught on video by someone nearby. You can hear the impact, you can see the fireball, and you can imagine what the French troops felt when they saw that happening at their base.
Wow. Wow. Wow, another one. Wow, shit. Wow.
France responded with precision. The French government ordered the Charles de Gaulle to be sent to the Mediterranean. The Charles de Gaulle is the only aircraft carrier that France has, and it's one of the few nuclear-powered aircraft carriers in operation in the entire world. With a single reckless attack on a naval base in Abu Dhabi, Iran put the French military force at sea with a nuclear-powered ship positioned very close to its borders. And besides France and the United Kingdom, even Germany has started to speak out. The leader of Germany publicly declared that this is not the time to lecture partners and allies, and that the German government wants to act where it has the real capacity to act. What was, just a few days earlier, a war between the United States, Israel, and Iran was pulling Europe into the conflict. Now stop for a second to think about what you're seeing. Think about what happened in less than 48 hours.
The day when the conflict in the Middle East reached the sovereign territory of the United Kingdom.
We support the legitimate collective self-defense of our allies and our people in the region.
This is the HMS Duncan and the HMS Dragon. Both are Type 45 destroyers.
Wow. Wow. Wow, another one. Wow, shit. Wow.
Iran did not gain a single ally, did not create any divisions between countries, did not force any ceasefire, did exactly the opposite of everything it intended, and yet it kept going in the same direction. This tells us something important about how Iran is making decisions at this moment. But let's continue, because what came next is even more revealing. Something bigger was happening behind the scenes. Retired American General Jack Keane in an interview confirmed that countries were joining the offensive operations coordinated by U.S. Central Command. Not just defensive operations, offensive operations. He didn't reveal which countries these were, but said that Admiral Brad Cooper, commander of CENTCOM, was coordinating these operations at that very moment. Then came President Trump. In an interview with the Daily Mail, Trump almost inadvertently confirmed that Saudi Arabia would soon be fighting against Iran, which gives us a strong indication that Saudi Arabia is one of the countries General Keane was referring to without naming names. Trump also revealed the expected timeline for this war. He said it was always a 4-week process, that the operation was planned to last that long, maybe even less. We're talking about a big country and only 4 weeks, an operation with a set deadline, with a coalition that keeps growing, while Iran continues to accumulate enemies on all sides. And do you want to know what Iran decided to do in the midst of all this chaos? The Iranian foreign minister went on television to try to explain his government's strategy. He said that the attacks have nothing to do with the brotherly nations in the region, that he had contacted all his counterparts in the Middle East, that he knew they were not happy, that some were even angry, but he hoped they would understand what was happening. And that's exactly where the heart of the problem lies.
I could add new aspects to that.
Iran hoped that the world would understand, but the world understood something completely different from what they wanted to communicate. What Saudi Arabia understood was that Iran is willing to attack a neutral country, one that gave no reason to be attacked. What the United Kingdom understood was that Iran is willing to strike British bases in territory that had absolutely nothing to do with this war. What France understood was that a French military facility can be destroyed by a drone without warning, without justification. And what all these countries did with this understanding was exactly the same thing. They set aside neutrality and moved to the active side of the war. What we are seeing now is the result of a sequence of mistakes, one after another. Iran believed that by pressuring the whole world would give in. But the whole world did not give in. The whole world reacted. In 2 days, Iran went from a conflict against the United States and Israel to a situation where it is facing a coalition that includes the United Kingdom, France, Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, and possibly other countries that have not yet made their involvement public. The truth is that Iran is isolating itself, destroying any possibility of finding allies or mediators who could help negotiate a diplomatic solution. Because no country in the world will want to sit at the negotiating table on behalf of a regime that has just attacked its military base. This has a name in military strategy: diplomatic suicide. And that's exactly what we're seeing happen in real time. Tell me here in the comments, in your opinion, does Iran still have a chance to save itself in this war, or is it already too late? If you've made it this far, you now understand this war in a way that most people don't. Not just what happened, but why it happened. Share this video with someone who is also following the conflict, and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next updates. See you next time.